Aaron, good to see you today.
Yeah, good to see you too.
I want to congratulate you on your win of the Eden election.
Thank you.
The randomness favored you.
Yeah.
I want to start by acknowledge that you've been in the EOS community since before EOS was a thing. You started off in Steam and have then with the EOS blockchain these past 4 years through the good times and the bad times and now the good times again. So I want to thank you so much for your dedication to EOS and your support of Eden. What feedback can you offer me on the process and what do you think of how things are going with Eden on EOS?
The process went pretty well, especially from a technical level. Like I was half expecting some sort of small process delay where it's like, oh, this edge case happened and we didn't figure it out. But everything went really smoothly. I think there was a little bit of coordination issues on the call, like people on the calls that I was a part of, like maybe we didn't know how to start it. Maybe we were waiting for somebody. I know these are things that we've kind of talked about. A lot of it, I think, was boiled down to the people processes that, are largely chaotic and unknown, but those are probably the only areas that I really think needed any sort of improvement or better guidelines or something like that. So
definitely a learning experience for everyone involved, right?
Yeah, certainly.
We got a lot done in the past 6 months, and some guidelines around, hey, get on the call. You've got 5 minutes to get on the call, and then everybody starts whether or not you're there. I've been thinking about adding a check-in process. So the morning of the election, everyone has to check in at the start, and you can only vote if you checked in, and you don't wait on anyone who didn't check in before the entire process starts. There's a couple little things like that I learned that could really improve things. So what is it that has motivated you to stay with EOS from the beginning through all these hard times and on through the Eden process?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't think it's just one thing necessarily. Back even in the early days of Steam, when I got involved and met some of my current teammates through that system, it's been just the flexibility of the system itself and being able to see that potential of what this can do. When you look around the rest of the crypto ecosystem, it's hard to find things that match the same level of completeness that we have here, and like the ability to actually do things as opposed to wait for features to be deployed. It's not I am a big fan of a lot of other non-EOSIO projects as well, but we're able to actually do things here and affect change, and we have some really powerful systems in place that'll hopefully let us as a team and me as an individual build the things that like got me interested in crypto in the first place. We haven't really been able to focus on any of that stuff yet. Like we've just been kind of focused on, like me personally, I've been focused on the wallet stuff for 5 or 6 years now. And we're getting close to what we imagine our vision of what that could be is, but eventually we would love to get into the point where we're actually building applications on these chains. And right now this is currently the best home that we see fit for those types of applications. So
what applications got you interested in crypto in the first place?
Before I really got, like, I was aware of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and everything before I actually dove in. But what I was working on when I decided to take the leap and actually start investing more time was a review website. It was, think a Yelp-like website. And one of the problems we faced was the ability for people to be able to trust reviews, like trusting content on the web. You had reports of things like Yelp deleting reviews, fake reviews, fake profiles, lots of just fake information that was out there. So I saw blockchain as a way to potentially decentralize that a little bit, make it so that the users owned their own content or could prove that they owned their content and solve some of the issues that happened in the review space. It's been years since I've worked in that side of things, and I don't know that I'd necessarily go back with how everything's changed. But that was kind of the interest, or that was kind of the topic that sparked my interest to really get into this. And now the opportunities are just so much, like there are so many more ideas that we've had since then that it's just a great way to potentially verify that data is real.
One of the things that EdenOnEOS is building, in my mind, is a foundation of trust, of reputation for all the Eden members. And so if you were to build a review site and you happen to be an Eden member, you could trust the reviews of Eden members because of our own internal governance processes that we're establishing to hold people accountable to the truth, and having a process for resolving disputes and for making decisions as a group and standing by them. And if we can create that type of environment, it's the foundation upon which powerful applications, whether it's a review system for things, a review system for people, a insurance system for people for various things, a GoFundMe system, all these types of things are possible when you have a community with integrity. And I guess the blockchain provides sort of the foundation, the technological coordination that cryptographically verifies things. And your software with your Anchor wallet has been a key element of making EOS one of the most usable chains, well, at least once you have an account, that is out there. So I'd like to hear from you what you think needs to be done.
We have a lot of plans with Anchor on how to kind of make that work. The protocols behind it, we've built really kind of allow for you to, in a very trustless way, verify that you are the owner of that account. And then, it also provides a great way for any application to be able to send you a transaction and for you to be able to relay a transaction back to the blockchain and the application. But what we want to expand upon is to fight against some of this, like you can't really trust where a request is coming from these days. And we have some generic processes in place to protect you from signing things that maybe you didn't mean to sign, like changing your keys. We see a lot of phishing going on in that regard, and a lot of wallets don't protect against that. But one of the things we'd like to do, and we don't even have a name for it at this point, but we've been talking about it for about a year now, is some sort of app registry and discovery system. We want for apps themselves to be able to publish on chain who they are with a key that then requests from their applications to you as a user could be verified against that key. So that way nobody can fake these requests and say, I am this great app, and then turn around and try to change your keys on you. That's kind of one of the next big steps we have. It's not going to be Anchor specific. It's going to be a protocol that Anchor will follow, sort of like the signing request protocol we have and this new account creation protocol that we'll be releasing soon. We're trying to build it so that way other wallets in this space can also follow this example and, follow these standards, so that way all these benefits can be conveyed to the users of any wallets. One of the kind of core principles since I've started, I've tried to make it so that users can choose what wallet they want. Having one central wallet that's official or the only one is not healthy, because then you're reliant on that one team and you have to trust that one team. But if there are multiples in the space using all the same protocols, create this really friendly ecosystem that, it's more fault tolerant, I guess.
Yeah, in independent systems, redundancy is absolutely necessary to secure individual liberty and independence. I'm really excited that you're starting to tackle that. That was one of the things that I was working on, like the year after EOS launched. Me and my team at Block One spent a lot of time on EOS IO Authenticator working on standards to attempt to address how do you authenticate a application and the transaction is coming from that application. And the ideas we had at the time was that a particular application can basically whitelist all the actions that they could ever request and blacklist things that they'll never request, so that if you ever see a signing request for this application that doesn't match that whitelist, then it won't be rejected. And then embedding that attestation, the attestation that the wallet relied on, into the transaction itself, so that even if you trick someone into signing it, it'll fail on chain because the attestation of the metadata for the application in question does not match the published one. And the wallet doesn't have to then trust the communication channels, because everything the wallet relied on when presenting the request to the user is asserted on chain real time. And so you can't even sign something that would violate it. And then in that way, it protects both the user and the the app developer, because the app developer could have their server hacked. They could lose their keys on their server, which has to be up 24/7, and still submit a bogus signing request. So it's not just a matter of authenticating a particular server. It's actually going down to the blockchain and having multi-sig over the, I guess, the whitelist of permissions. At least that was the idea that I was pitching with the eosio Authenticator. At Block One, we released a lot of specs. I'm curious how much of that has fed into your thinking. What things have you been evolving with?
Definitely took inspiration from the work that was done there. We decided to break it up. Like, I think that implementation was it was a big package and everything was pretty intertwined. So we kind of piecemealed it out, and we're trying to build kind of layers as opposed to the way that it was all kind of in one with the reference authenticator. But that's definitely served as inspiration and acted as a little bit of a goalpost for us. We obviously went a slightly different direction and published the eosio signing request protocol as just kind of a standalone piece. But yeah, there were some good ideas within that flow that we were able to be like, oh yeah, this is an important piece of this equation. And there were a few things that we looked at and we were like, that's kind of friction for the user experience. And so we didn't tackle those things yet. The intentions of those things were good. We just were trying to figure out a better execution for those things. So
yeah, so much of it depends on communicating the information to the end user in a way that doesn't overburden them with details that they can't possibly verify.
Yeah,
I've long said that a user should never see a hash, and they should never see a key, and they should see logos and colors and names that are human readable, and all the information that they're relying on. Like, if the app can be as self-contained so that you can build one wallet that communicates the necessary information to the user, and logos and other visual things are key. I suspect that now that we have Eden on EOS, we can utilize the governance process for whitelisting. These are trusted apps, kind of a review thing. And then that way we have a decentralized process to determining which apps a wallet trusts, and then you're trusting the community's governance. And if there's a problem with it, then you can have disputes with and get them resolved in the community as far as things. And you can hold the app developers accountable for how they, I guess the disclosures they make, right? It's like the privacy warnings that Apple requires for all apps in the App Store. These are the data that your app's going to access, and you have to declare what you're doing with the data and all those other things. We need very similar things for domains that are hosting smart contracts. Say, I'm not going to touch your tokens, I'm not going to do this, but I will do these things. Or I might update permissions, and a way of disclosing all those things in a way that users can understand. and reason about without scaring them off, without them
Yeah.
having to understand the internals in a way that feels natural. One of the things that I've been looking at trying to achieve, and I'm interested in your feedback on, is the idea of sessions, the ability to log into a website and not have to go back to Anchor for every single signing request. And the idea of a wallet being more of like a password manager. People are familiar with LastPass and OnePass and all those other tools. And they know about passwords. And if they're using passwords correctly these days, they're essentially private keys because they're really long random strings and you never have to look at them. And so if you could get to the point where the wallet shows all the domains you're logged into, you've got dedicated keys for each thing, you can revoke a key right from the wallet, and you can, I guess, temporarily delegate authority to a particular web page so that it stays in RAM, never written to disk, but the web page can now sign things on your behalf after you've vetted that it's on a domain that is trusted and whatnot. And the smart contracts are written in such a way that no serious harm can come. Right? They're not going to transfer your tokens. It's like Steemit. On Steemit, we had owner, active, and posting authority. And posting authority allowed you to post and vote, but you couldn't transfer tokens. And in that way, you allowed encapsulated level of trust just for different things. And so I'd really love to see the wallet move toward a password paradigm, so that's a familiar story for users, and the terminology is not keys and this and all this scary stuff. It's just, oh, I need a password to log into it. Oh, I have to use a password manager. Great. You know, Anchor is my password manager, and oh, it needs me to log in. I use it just like I would use a two-factor auth or something, and then I'm logged in, and then I go about my business, and periodically it asks me to, I guess, re-log in to certify risky actions.
Why we're focusing on this app registry and gallery first is because we want it before we get into kind of automatic signing. And the reason for that is that if you're going, the way, I'm going to start a little bit backwards here. We plan to use the permission system, which I think is what you were describing, to be able to create unique keys that are limited in scope for specific applications. We have the capability through Fuel to buy RAM for users and kind of make sure that adding additional keys in the permission system isn't going to be a hurdle like it has been kind of previously. But what we want to be able to do with this registry system is for you to verifiably be able to get something that looks like you were logging in with GitHub or Facebook or Gmail or whatever, and it says, this is what this is going to be able to do. Like, you're granting permission to this thing to do these on your behalf, essentially. And then we're going to be able to do that verifiably through this registry system. And then once that's in place, we want to be able to do key generation events and store those keys in the browser safely. Potentially even using things like WebAuthn or any of the kind of more secure ways that you could secure a key in your browser. But then from that point on, after you grant that permission, you'll just be able to use that website and sign transactions in your browser, very much like the posting key on Steam. When it's a low security action, like, it's probably okay. There are some negative things that could happen to you, like somebody could use all your CPU or something, or vote fraudulently on your behalf. But we wouldn't want to allow those keys to do things necessarily like token transfers and auth updates and the things that could actually cause irreversible damage to your account. But with the kind of registry in place, then moving to the being able to generate keys, new permissions, save them in your browser, it'll probably be all part of an SDK, so that way developers don't have to think about this. And then when they're using those actions on that website, things will happen automatically. And if the website requests something that your key does not have the permission to, we want to automatically be able to kick it up to Anchor and have the user interface show that. Like maybe you voted, just happened automatically. It was on chain, we signed it in the browser, but now you want to tip somebody or something. Now the normal Anchor UI pops up and is like, hey, go approve this because we couldn't do it automatically. So kind of this multiple levels of security and run with it from there. I mean, that's something that when we get around to building apps, we're probably not going to build apps that are super secure. Not, that's a bad way to say it, that require high levels of trust. Like, I don't think if we built an app, not a wallet, we wouldn't want to be doing token transfers and updating auths and all that stuff. So we would be fine letting users interact with that app, whether it's a game or a social platform or whatever, just with a key in the browser. And then when you go back to Anchor and you look at the apps section, which is currently called sessions, but we eventually do want to call it apps and make it a little bit more friendly. You'll just be able to remove that app from your phone without ever going back to the website if you want to log it out. It's like you have remote logout control. So these are, we went pretty deep down this rabbit hole in theory, and we have a couple really small pieces of it built. But right now we felt like that registry component, so you could trust where those key requests were coming from, was first.
What do you think Eden and the governance process of Eden can use to help Anchor and what you're doing with Anchor?
Oh, I mean, it's just getting more hands and fingers and brains working on this kind of tech. I think that we're going to try to publish, like just yesterday, I posted a big post that was more vision related for what I saw as the future of what we're specifically going to work on. But I think getting in depth on those specific topics so that way other people can see that project's vision and then contribute on whether it's writing code or monetarily or through community efforts on trying to find ways that this might break and let other people know. We're still kind of figuring out that part, but the easy answer.
It'd be great if you could have a whitelist, blacklist actions that the Eden consensus and representatives can basically select apps, and if a problem comes up, Eden can report it, and then you can display warnings. You can still allow users to sign it, but say, hey, the Eden community has issued a warning here. This app cannot be trusted. And then that way, collectively, the Eden community can vet applications, both the good applications and the malicious applications, to kind of like separate them from the nearly unknown applications that are out there. That would be great. What plans do you have to specifically help Eden?
Like right now, I'm trying to be involved in the processes as kind of this randomly selected head right now. I'm getting my bearings and seeing what the others around me have been doing to both coordinate calls, coordinate ideas. I'm trying to offer insight into what other people are presenting as ideas. But I think that the most valuable thing that I can do, besides try to offer bits of leadership where possible, is help solve some of the hurdles that we face being on Eden. Right now we're operating on EOS. And so I think things like account creation and ease of onboarding and resource management and some of these other hard problems that EOS has, and thus Eden has, are worth making sure we keep solving. For Eden directly, on our first call, we just had it the other day with the 6 of us that were kind of at the top. We've identified a few ideas that we think we can steer the community towards to kind of help shape how we communicate with one another, not during an election, not during the official processes, but when we're in the off season, I guess. I don't know exactly what we're calling it, but and finding ways to engage more people. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things.
Are you going to delegate any budget to anybody else? Or are you going to make final calls on all spending?
I'm still personally figuring that out. I have a meeting with my accountant next week to kind of talk about the ramifications and like what the best way to do this will be. I think with yesterday, we were talking in the Telegram channel and the question of 3 months versus 6 months came up, like when's the next election? And the answer to that, like I ran on a platform expecting this to be 3 months worth of funding. So what I kind of pitched was based around 3 months. So if this is actually 6 months, then that kind of completely changes the plans that I had, and it's going to open up funding that I can start delegating to other projects. Again, I need to figure out what that means to me financially and what I can do, just because working in crypto, getting paid in crypto, like I am very cautious in that. Yeah, it's really complicated. And it's not fun. But I want to make sure I can handle that all right before I make any promises. But I really would like, especially if it's twice what I was anticipating, to be able to contribute back to some of these other Eden run projects.
One of the things that I'm attempting to work through is having overlapping terms for leaders, which means if we have the next election in 6 months, you'll still have like you could potentially still have funding and or authority for a year or maybe 2 years, and then we just have multi-sig of the representatives for the past couple terms to make things. How would you feel about this being a longer term position where you go from being the only person to being one of two to one of three to one of four before your term finally ends?
That's interesting. I mean, even on our call with the higher level delegates right now, one of the things I brought up was it would be cool if we had a multi-sig budget, like either instead of the sortition style or in addition to, because it seems like when we were all talking, it was like, oh yeah, we have all identified this as something that would be worthwhile doing. And then the question comes up, it's like, who's paying for it? Are we all paying for it? We can't like necessarily force all of us to pay for it. So there's this burden on each of us individually to either commit to that and honor it or look elsewhere. So the idea of having kind of a rolling group that builds up, and I'm assuming it would always remain at a certain set size after, like, say,
Yeah.
I was
once
done.
you get to 4, you've got 3 or 4, you can do Byzantine fault tolerance.
Yeah. And then when the 5th comes on board, maybe the 1st falls off. So like I can fall off. But yeah, having a group like that, it'd be a great way to transfer knowledge and experiences through different terms. You kind of have like a senior at the top who is the eldest, who has been there the longest and seen the most through the process, that could then help the next person come on board, and then both could help the 3rd, all 3 could help the 4th, and then you kind of just continually repeat that.
And you can do this at multiple levels, right? We've got the chief delegates, the 6 of you. In future elections with more people, that group might not be 6, it might be 7, 8, 9, because it's based on sort of the remainder of, as you do the division of 5, 5, 5, you eventually get to a number of people that doesn't form complete groups. And with groups of 5, you need to have at least 10 people in order to have 2 groups, and then randomly select one of the 2 leaders. So that group at the top could be anywhere from 10 to 15, up to 15 people, so that the sortition round is meaningful. So that group of chief delegates could grow sizably in the future versus just the 6 that we have today. And it's just a function of the number of members participating in the election, the number of groups that actually reach consensus versus fail consensus, and so forth. So we don't know until the time of what that chief delegate system is. But one of the principles from my book the governance should be relatively stable, and the rules and bylaws should be relatively stable because human nature is relatively stable. And we kind of need rapid change in the beginning, but we need to hone in and then gradually move towards something that the general rules and bylaws of the Eden community, which in addition to the budget that you have now, eventually the winner is going to be responsible for either ratifying proposed bylaws from previous terms or proposing new bylaws to be ratified by subsequent elections. So how do you feel about, even though for the first year I'm kind of taking on the sole decider of bylaws for the purpose of, I guess, realizing the complete vision, but eventually this has to be handed over to the community, and that would be one of the things in addition to the technological and the funding, but just deciding how Eden works. Do you have any opinions about what type of bylaws you'd like to see?
I don't at this point. I think being, what, 5 days into the seat now, I'm really still getting my bearings and am not necessarily ready to make great recommendations about, like, here are the rules. I'm very much exploring ideas like that. Like, I'm still wrapping my head around the sortition side of things and the implications of that randomness. And now when we're talking about potentially expanding the random selected person forward into future groups or future cycles, I don't know what the right word there is, that adds like a new twist to it. For me personally, like when I'm presented with a system, like I have to get inside and understand all the little pieces. And that's really what I'm still doing with this process. There were a lot of things that I didn't know coming into it. And I'm now learning like what has been done previously. Having not participated in an election before, I kind of came in blind, except just reading a little bit of sparse materials. It's hard to find information right now. That's another point of feedback. We talked about that on our call because one of the topics that was coming up was the website. So definitely helping the newcomers into these systems on board a little bit more efficiently will be good for that. But it's to loop us back now that I've driven us a little bit off topic. I don't know that I have great examples of bylaws. Like I do look forward to seeing what you propose and what exists and what other people propose, because I think that'll give me a better idea of what fits and kind of both the ethos and the community, and like what we should try to impose rules on and what we should avoid.
Yeah. So for clarity, for those who don't know what bylaws are both the smart contract code, which is implementing Eden. That's sort of the most objective form of the bylaws, the Ricardian contracts that go along with it, and then the subjective behaviors that we expect of members that we're going to hold members accountable to, such as being honest or showing up on time or speaking a certain language, or not, speaking negatively about the community, right? We have to be aligned. That's the whole point, is to have alignment and unity of purpose with the members, and it's voluntary. So if you disagree with the direction, you can resign and then the bylaws no longer apply to you. Obviously, I'm pursuing a much bigger governance thing, and I sort of got into crypto because I knew we needed a new way to govern society based on nonviolence, free markets. And if we create that society or that community where there's integrity, where there's justice, where there's property rights, and where there's mutual aid, you're creating a lot of value that a lot of people are going to want to build in that ecosystem, just like Hong Kong was able to attract a lot, just like Singapore is able to attract a lot. These small cities that have more freedom than other countries, business flocks there. And I think that we're going to have to replicate that in a in the metaverse, digital world of blockchain, or we're just going to repeat the same kind of corruption that exists in other cryptos, or inability to make changes, right? Things are just like, right, Bitcoin is what it is. Blocks are not going to get any bigger. Fees are going to go through the moon, and it's going to all be custodial services. And next thing you know, Bitcoin is like gold. No one ever touches it, and everyone's just using bank deposits. And we saw how gold ended up being removed from the backing, and the governments took it over. So even if Bitcoin is provides a better version of gold, it's not. It doesn't provide the independence that allows people to directly control it. It actually might be worse than gold because the transaction fees are higher. Anyway, off that soapbox, I'm curious, have you read my book, More Equal Animals?
I honestly have not. I haven't read a book in probably 20 years. And it's largely,
20 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
All right, well, as elected representative of Eden, I would highly encourage you to make an exception to your 20-year policy of not reading books, and get the ideas in here, because it explains the reason why we have sortition, the how the Pareto principle impacts things, and it will really help guide you as you're like considering bylaws and funding and what this whole thing's all about. So as leader and representative of the community, which is highly based around the ideas in this book, I think it's worth paying yourself to read the book.
And I've read many conversations about it, and I've read excerpts of it as people have been sharing it. And I think I follow your train of thought. So finding the time to actually read it, I'm sure things will click and make sense. Like, I think that my mind works on a similar process. So it's just finding that time. So that's my entire goal towards the end of the year, is figuring out how I free myself up to be able to do more. So right now I'm bogged down.
One of the things that's highly relevant in my book is I have a chapter on smart contracts, or the title transfer theory of property rights, which gets into Ricardian contracts and what things can be in contracts and which things are merely reputation, and getting away from a promise-based contract society to one of, it's either a promise and it impacts your reputation, or there's collateral and title transfers, and the only thing that people are judging is Boolean facts. You don't have judges making arbitrary rulings on the interpretations of contracts. You ask them to be oracles of facts, and contracts spell out what's supposed to happen, and then that allows people to know in advance when they're entering an agreement what their maximum damages are from this contract, because they see what the collateral is. It allows people to take more responsibility for choosing who to do business with, because you know that you don't actually have recourse beyond reputational damage if there's not a collateral involved in the transaction. Because what we've done as a society is we've introduced moral hazard with assuming we can trust people because we have promise-based contracts, and those promises are then used as collateral for more promises and so forth. And then somewhere along the line, the promise is actually fraudulent. Fractional reserve banking, selling insurance that doesn't exist, selling seats in airplanes that don't exist. You have all these promises that are broken, and or I guess using the same collateral to back multiple promises. All this musical chairs that the entire economy is built on, and no one is forced to take personal responsibility for saying, hey, I trusted them and they violated the trust. It's like, I trusted them, they violated, I'm going to sue. And then the government's going to, what's going to do at the end of the day? Reallocate resources based upon something. And that whole, I call it smart contracts, which is based on, I guess, a better way of describing what Rothbard was saying with the title transfer theory of contract. But the entire way we think about contracts needs to be updated in light of what we can do with blockchains. And I basically make the case that the only contracts that should be enforceable are contracts that could have been represented as a smart contract. Even if you don't actually code up the contract, the question is it something that code could enforce, assuming the only thing that the code could govern was the pairing between an owner and the title to something in the real world. And then it's really black and white. The courts just have to enforce. If the code says you own this, we're going to make sure that you have access to it in real life. End of story. And I think that that's the bigger picture of what we're up to. Is with Eden, we're creating the governance structures in process to do the subjective enforcement, to do the insurance. We've got the blockchain infrastructure for doing the smart contracts that handle all the really big things like real estate transactions and identity and dispute awards and then we get the philosophy out there. So that's what I hope to achieve. I'm super excited that you were both selected by the community and the God of randomness selected you to be the custodian for the community for the next 6 months and potentially longer.
It's awesome. It's an honor to do it. I mean, I've been around for a long time. So for things to kind of play out like they did was very unexpected. I mean, honestly, as we were watching the randomness, I was sitting there, I was like, it's not gonna be me. Like, that's just par for the course right now. And then it happened. So here we are, and I'm gonna try to make the best of the situation. And I mean, I think personally, I'm probably approaching the point in my career where I need to stop programming so much and start directing programmers to, like, I have the vision now, and it's time to have other people help me see that vision and stop burying myself in that work.
It's a hard transition.
Yeah.
I haven't touched the line of code since I was writing smart contracts for Bullish.
I'm a little envious.
I miss the coding aspect of it, but there's just so much foundational work, that you can have much bigger impact by communicating and getting ideas out there and coordinating others so that you can really amplify the manpower behind things. It's a whole new skill to develop. And my dad always told me, when I retire, I'm going to get back to programming. He's retired now. He says he doesn't want to program.
Well, I hope I can fit those shoes well. Time will tell. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your faithful support of the EOS community. I really hope that your team is as excited as we are that you got funding. There's no one more deserving in my mind. So
thank you. We will do our best to kind of show that this process works. We're excited to see how, like, we ran on one thing with, we really want to make it so that the blockchain side of things is less of a concern for users. So that way these processes that, we've been talking about on this call are easier for people to shift to. I mean, it's really easy to pick up a pen and use kind of traditional promise type contract, but it's a lot harder when you're talking about doing it on chain. And it's really been our mission to make that easier. Hopefully, not only will we do that by leading by example now, but we can, not even we, like me specifically, hopefully I can help guide that a little bit more as well. So I'm excited to see where we're heading. I'm excited for the projects that I saw people having a desire to work on. I hope I can help them make their visions a reality as well, both through talking with them and maybe providing advice, as well as providing kind of the base layer stuff that they need, because our team has thought about it and started creating it. So hopefully on multiple fronts, we'll make this process easier, better, and come to a reality for a lot more people.
Yeah. Well, I just want to encourage you to consider not just your project, but the fact that you are representing the entire community, and to, like you've been doing, working with the chief delegates who representing the rest of the community, make sure that everyone's ideas and intentions are noted, even if they're not necessarily prioritized, that they are not disregarded. Because there's a lot of people that say, well, we just fund everything, but there is a very real economies of scale. And if everyone has one brick, you can't do anything with it. But you put all the bricks together, you can build a wall, but you can't build a wall for everyone. So at a certain point, we do need to concentrate in order to achieve something. I like the analogy: if you have $100,000 that's spread among 100,000 people, so they all got $1, you can't do much with that $1. But if you pay one engineer for a year, you can get a lot done. You pay 365 engineers for a day, you're not going to get enough done, right? So there's a need to concentrate and focus in order to achieve anything. And so that's sort of the job of the representatives, is to factor in what everyone has to say and devise a plan that prioritizes and accomplishes as much for as many as possible. Because the success of EOS depends upon how people feel that the process worked out, and their willingness to continue to participate in Eden depends upon a belief and observation that Eden does represent them, that they have a voice and that they are heard. And it's the responsibility of you and all the representatives on the chain to demonstrate that by participating in Eden, you are heard and that you will be represented at all levels.
Absolutely. So, yeah. I look forward to being able to contribute to some of these other things, both financially, because there is now a budget available, and just guidance. I think I have a decent amount of that to offer as well, and that only comes at the cost of my time, which might be more valuable than the finances available, but I'm happy to share that where possible. And we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try to be as transparent as possible with whatever processes and stuff that I go through. I'll write about it. I'll record it. We have Violet Garden now that I've been looking to get into as well. Yeah.
I'm looking to have the Clarion team coordinate extensively with Violet Garden and with Gray Mass. I think that social engagement and community building is key, and the ease of use of Violet Garden is going to be critical to its success. And so my team is working on session keys and ways of simplifying that. And so we coordinating with your team and with Violet Garden to bring all these things together in synergy, and not just in a way that only benefits these three projects, but which facilitates other projects that want to have similar ease of use experiences. So I look forward to working with your team and with John's team.
Me too.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedule to come discuss this with me. And
yeah, likewise. I mean, I know you're busy as well. It's hard to align times like this, but it's good that we did it, and I'm sure it won't be the last time.